Hello again, friends. Welcome to Gamecock Central Radio. Emerson Phillips, joined by Gamecock Central columnist Scott Davis for a look at Scott's column that's up this week on Gamecock Central. The headline is Deja Vu all over again. Scott, a feel-good win for the Gamecock men's basketball team Saturday at the Colonial Life Arena as South Carolina beat Georgia, and the 1997 Gamecock SEC championship team was honored at halftime of that game, and I think it was a stroll down memory lane for a lot of us longtime Gamecock fans and really brought back some good memories, and the win over Georgia helped as well.
Absolutely. I was attending almost every South Carolina home game when that 96-97 team just came out of nowhere to win the SEC. They started the season really poorly. I think they were 5-5 at one point, and I think they lost to UNC Asheville at home. I mean, they were going absolutely nowhere. All of a sudden, the SEC slate gets started, and they just started winning and kept winning, and that is still one of my favorite South Carolina athletic teams of all time. B.J. Mackey's still probably my favorite Gamecock athlete of all time in any sport. So I really love those guys, and this game Saturday reminded me a lot of them, and oddly enough, they were being honored at halftime of that game. So everything kind of came full circle. It was great to see South Carolina hang on to win a game in which, quite honestly, they didn't play very well. And those are the kind of games that they've lost in recent years, the kind of games that have kept them out of the NCAA tournament. And this year they hung on to get it done. Special
team back in 97, Scott. We'll talk more about this Georgia game in a moment, but I was talking with some Gamecock fans over the weekend about, what an incredible couple of years Carolina had back in the late 90s under Coach Eddie Fogler. And that 97 team beat Cincinnati team on the road that year that was ranked in the top 10 in the country. Danny Fortson was a top 10 pick in the NBA draft later that year, and that was when Bob Huggins had Cincinnati really rolling, and that was just a signature win for that Eddie Fogler club, and it was the kind of win that the Gamecocks had not had on the road since the Frank McGuire years, road win over a top 10 team. And later that year, you mentioned in your column this week, the Gamecocks beat Kentucky on the road on Kentucky's senior day, and Kentucky had never been beaten at home on their senior day, and Melvin Watson broke down the Kentucky press so successfully that game. Great memories for Gamecock basketball fans.
Absolutely. If you're a younger fan and don't really remember those times or don't know about that team, it was a very exciting time to pull for South Carolina basketball. The Cincinnati game that you just mentioned, I remember exactly where I was and what I was doing when that game was on. I was watching it on TV at my grandmother's house as she was making some sort of stew or something for lunch, and I came into the game with no expectations of them winning that game on the road. Cincinnati had been to the Final Four a couple times, recently when that game was played, and so it was a huge win for them, and it really solidified what a special season that this was going to be, and it really crested when they went to Lexington on senior day and just methodically took care of Kentucky. Went at a time when Kentucky was just as they are now, really at the height of their powers. So that was a great team. This team this year is not, I don't think, going to be that special, but look, they have a chance to win the SEC. It's going to be a tough road. They've got a lot of tough games left. But if they keep winning, they can get it done, and that would really, really be just a tremendous thing for Frank Martin in his time at South Carolina. So we'll see what happens, but so far there's a lot of similarities between the two teams.
Gamecock Central Radio here, Emerson Phillips with our columnist Scott Davis. We invite you to download the Gamecock Central Radio app. We got this free phone app that's available on the App Store and on Google Play. It allows you to listen to our podcast for free anywhere you receive cell phone service. Our podcasts are free. The phone app is free. You can subscribe to our podcast. Just search for Gamecock Central Radio on iTunes, SoundCloud, and other popular services, or visit radio.GamecockCentral.com. So that brings us back around, Scott, to Saturday's game at the Colonial Life Arena against Georgia, and the Gamecocks struggled at the foul line throughout this ball game, Scott, and that really helped Georgia kind of hang around, but it was a couple of Gamecock free throws late in the game that put the game on ice, but the free throw struggles made it tough.
Oh, boy, they really did. South Carolina missed 11 free throws in the game, and that's a lot. But I'm telling you, when you watch the game, it felt like it was 1,000. I mean, they just could not buy one for stretches at a time. B.J. Dozier's been a guy who's knocked him down this year. He missed 6 free throws during the game. Sindarius Thornwell missed a couple, and he's also been money from the line. And gosh, if you don't have Justin Mackey at the end of the game, who really has not been a great free throw shooter for South Carolina this year, come in and ice 2 with a couple seconds left in the game, who knows, South Carolina may lose that game. But they did a couple of things to offset that. They created a lot of turnovers in this game. Georgia turned the basketball over a bunch, and then South Carolina was able to knock down a whole bunch of three-pointers, and that's not really a huge part of their game. They're a decent three-point shooting team, but they don't look to fire from long range, a ton. And they were able to make a lot Saturday, and had those two things not happened, they probably lose this game.
Scott, I thought it was apropos, almost poetic, in fact, that Justin Mackey sealed the win Saturday with a couple of huge plays, a three-pointer late in the contest. It was a real backbreaker for Georgia, and then it was Mackey at the foul line in the closing seconds making a pair of free throws. And, of course, it was Justin's father, B.J., who was the star of the 97 team, which was honored at halftime of Saturday's game.
Well, sometimes sports are hard to follow because it seems like there's more pain than joy in following a sports team. But every now and then there's a moment that makes you remember why you care about this stuff. And that was one of them. Justin Mackey, really, quite honestly, a little used player in his first 3 years in the program. He's been getting more and more minutes this year as a senior and has contributed some meaningful moments for South Carolina this year, but none more important than in this game and on a day where his father's greatest team and the greatest South Carolina basketball team of the last 40 years was being honored. He goes out there and, as you said, hits a critical three-pointer, with a couple of minutes left in the game. And then with the game literally on the line, he knocks down 2 free throws to ice the contest. So no matter what has happened in Justin Mackey's career at South Carolina, he is going to have that moment to look back on and reflect on, especially if the Gamecocks make the NCAA tournament and have a nice run there.
Yeah, hadn't gotten a ton of minutes this year coming off the bench, but he's an effort player, tremendous defender, a little bit inconsistent in the scoring department, but I like the role that he plays for this Frank Martin ball club. And it's good, I think, for Gamecock fans just to see him on the team, to see that Mackey name on the back of his jersey, and great to see a Gamecock legacy contributing to this Gamecock basketball team that is in first place in the SEC standings right now after the win over Georgia. And, of course, BJ, Justin's father, is an assistant coach at Charleston Southern right now. I see BJ throughout the year, every year. I see BJ in Columbia. He does a lot of recruiting for Charleston Southern. I see him at the Chick-fil-A Classic at Richland Northeast High School every year the week before Christmas. He's always around checking out local high school talent. So BJ's still very much on the scene in the South Carolina basketball circle. So, Scott, Deja Vu all over again, the headline for your column this week on Gamecock Central. And I thought it was interesting that you draw comparisons between this team and Motley Crue, your favorite band from the 80s, Scott. And the book, I've not read this book, but I was interested to read what you had to say about it. I thought it was an interesting comparison.
I just reread that book again, and I always do once every year or so for some reason or another, probably because I'm completely insane. But when I was growing up in the 80s, I was a big, I was one of those guys who had long hair in middle school and was wearing these T-shirts of bands like Motley Crue. And when you read the book, it's extremely interesting because literally if you take any one of the band members out of the equation, the whole thing just collapses. It just simply doesn't work. Even the members who were more role players than stars. And started thinking about South Carolina's basketball team, and this year's team especially, they are a true team in every sense of the word. They all need to be involved. Sindarius Thornwell, clearly their most important player. But honestly, he scored 18 points Saturday, but it was a quiet 18 points, to be honest with you. Hit some threes, but at the end of the game, when it was time to win the basketball game, it was actually P.J. Dozier who was driving to the basket and making a lot of those critical, I'm just not going to let this team lose this game type baskets. And so I really think, and at the same time, there were a lot of role players, bench guys, little used guys who really contributed to the win. And so there are certain teams that really, truly define what it means to be a team. And this is not a one-man show or a two-man show. It's a true team. And so that was where I saw the parallels between bands like Motley Crue and TV shows and movie stars that we just want to see work together. And when they're working individually, we're not interested. So you see that happen a lot. And I think that's one of the things that's unique about this team and enjoyable about watching them is that they truly operate as a team.
All right, the Gamecocks reminding Scott Davis of Motley Crue without some of the decadence, of course, from the 80s. And, Scott, you had the pleasure of seeing Motley Crue reunite at the Well, the Bon Secours Wellness Arena up in Greenville a few years back?
I sure did. In fact, I saw them there twice. I'm not ashamed to say that, folks. I did see them there twice, and it was a great time. I went once with my cousin and another time with a good friend of mine who was my roommate at USC and my best friend. So always a good time to see that. They've now retired, if you don't know that. They're no longer going to play shows together, but they did have one last final run as a band together, and it was fun to watch.
All right, Scott, the Gamecocks 19-4 overall now, 16-1 when Cindarius Thornwell plays. Carolina 9-1 in the SEC and alone in first place in the Southeastern Conference standings right now. Big game coming up at Florida in a couple of weeks. Florida whipped Kentucky this past weekend, and that will be a real test for South Carolina on the road. But Scott, it is a real possibility that the Gamecocks could run the table and match the 97 team's SEC mark of 15-1. I've told people over the years that we may live a long time before we see the Gamecocks go 15-1 in SEC play, but Frank Martin's ball club may have a chance to do it this year.
They're on the cusp of it. It's within their grasp, and they just have to go win. As I said in the column, a lot of tough games left, even some of the home games. I mean, you've got a Tennessee team that has played very well at times this year. Arkansas has played very well at times this year, been a little inconsistent. Lost to Missouri this weekend, but still a very tough team. And then you got to go on the road to Florida in a game that really looks difficult. But at the same time, you can't count these guys out. There's really only been one or two games when Thornwell was out and they played Memphis. That game was kind of a sleepwalk. And then the Kentucky game on the road was obviously difficult, but other than that, they've either won or come close to winning, and maybe even should have won the games that they've lost this year. So I would never put it past them to win any game left on their schedule. And if they keep operating as a team and everybody keeps contributing, they're going to have a shot. So the opportunity to win the SEC this year is very real, and I hope that they can seize the moment.
Certainly can't afford to look ahead with two road games this week, Tuesday night at Alabama and Saturday at Mississippi State, and then that big matchup with Florida in a couple of weeks that will take place in Gainesville. But, Scott, the Gamecocks rolling right now, ranked in the top 20 in the country, and Gamecock fans right now ready to rock and roll.
Absolutely. I hope they make some beautiful music the rest of the way, and it's been fun to watch. Gamecock fans really needed this season from them, and after everything that happened at the end of the football season, just needed something good to happen, and these guys have provided it. And they're just a likable group. They're just fun to watch. They play well, as I've said so many times, as a team, and there's just a lot to like about them. So let's all pull for them down the stretch, and I think maybe good things are in the future.
Great column this week, Scott. Really enjoy your work. Thanks for your time.
Thanks so much, Emerson. Talk to you later.
All right, Scott, good to be with you again. That's my man, Scott Davis, and I'm Emerson Phillips. Deja vu all over again is Scott Davis's column this week on Gamecock Central. We invite you to check it out. You're a Gamecock fan. You'll really enjoy his work, and that'll do it for this edition of Gamecock Central Radio. For Scott Davis, I'm Emerson Phillips. Thanks for being with us.